This is the Medical College of Wisconsin's Oral History Project. Today is August 16th, 2016, and I'm talking with Dr. Earnestine Willis, who is the Kellner Professor of Pediatrics, as well as the Director for the Center for the Advancement of Underserved Children, and the Director of Health Equity and Urban Clinical Care Partnerships as well.
Right.
So, well, thank you very much, Dr. Willis, for joining me today.
Good. Thank you.
Let's start at the beginning.
Okay.
What led to your interest in going into medicine as well as public health? When did you first have an interest in that?
My interest in public health as well as medicine started at an early age. One of my biochemistry professors in Tougaloo, which is my undergraduate school, set me down and counseled me at an early time to say, I said, I think I want to do a PhD in mathematics. And he says, Ernestine, you're a people person. I don't know that you'd be happy there. And so during my career development of trying to decide which way to go, I applied for a PhD program as well as medical school. With his insistence that he would be in the running, he said, come to the lab and sit here with this typewriter. People, youth don't know what typewriters are now, but he forced me to fill out an application to medical school. And that was the beginning. I spent some time doing research in Brookhaven National Lab. And after spending a semester at Brookhaven National Lab doing research in mathematics, I came back to my undergraduate school and said, you're right, I'm a people person. I think I'm going to go into medicine. So I applied to medical school, applied to University of Mississippi, Minnesota, Harvard, and got into Harvard within months of my application. Applied to Meharry, historically black medical schools also, but got into Harvard with the understanding that I would spend some time at Harvard during the summer doing cell biology. And so I returned, went to Radcliffe, spent the summer at Radcliffe, and with the understanding that I would start in the fall in medical school. So that's how I got into medical school. However, I knew I always, if I was going to end up in medicine, there was a little bird on my shoulder from an early age, since the age of 12. I've been a babysitter. And so it was something about that experience with children. I knew when I decided medicine, pediatric was going to be the way for me to go. It didn't say I didn't waver, but I did have some moments, temptation, I call it, of dermatology, surgery. But pediatric, I always came back to pediatrics. But I also, coming out of the South, recognized the role that public health played. And so after getting accepted into medical school and getting to Harvard and seeing the alignment of medicine and public health there, I said, oh, I should stay here another year and get the master's in public health and get the emphasis around maternal and child health. And at that time, I had two advisors, was Dr. Maslin and Dr. Streeter. Dr. Streeter was a pulmonologist at Children's Boston, and Dr. Maslin, who is deceased now, he was adolescent medicine person, who I spent time with him in the interim while I was getting my master's in public health, keeping my clinical skills up, and was really happy to have those people at my side of shepherding me through medical school. I would give the registrar credit, Miss Kohler, you can tell I remember the names, who recognized that I was making the transition culturally from the South to the Northeast and said to me, I went to her and I said, I don't have clothes heavy enough to deal with this weather. And she said, we'll take care of that. So I had a lot of support when I was at Harvard to say, you can do this and we are with you 100%, including one of my mentors who was a surgeon at Mass General calling me at 10 o'clock at night to say, I understand you're struggling a little bit with physiology, but hang in there. And I had books out all over the bed and I was studying. And he said, but you got to hang in there, Ernestine, you got to do this. So at that time, there were people who, they knew me, Dr. Culver, the surgeon at Mass General, who was my champions, who we didn't have a real personal relationship, but they understood the need to champion people like me at this point in my career.
So when you were a medical student at Harvard, you continued from the beginning to have an interest in pediatrics, and that stayed with you even though you were exposed to the other disciplines.
Yes, that stayed with me. I think I was given that I was going to be a pediatrician. I did some time with a dermatologist, and I remember him imprinting me that derm is the way to go. And I would get in his car with him. He happened to drive a Saab, and we would go out to Polaroid and some of the he did a lot of work with the companies, dermatological conditions that may have chemicals. And I would go to him to those clinics, and it was fun. But it didn't feel my passion. I think my passion was for children and helping children. So that was my thrust into medical school. My family moved from Mississippi in 1968. So while I was in college, I was coming back to Cleveland, back and forth. And I felt this was probably, I've been away from home now 9 years. And I was in Mississippi without my family, and I was in Boston without my family. So I go, well, you know, I should do my residency in Cleveland. So I moved to Cleveland, Case Western, and did a residency. And everybody, you know, when you do your education, you say, this is the best education you can have. Just like Boston is the best place you can be educated.
And so you were really at two of the top institutions in medicine. You were at Harvard, you were at Case Western.
Oh, yeah.
So
Oh, yeah.
you really had the opportunity to work with some of the top people in the field.
Oh, yeah. And Case Western was a very progressive environment at that time. I think the students coming there would get a patient family from the day one that they walked in, and they would follow all family members as they would still go to their basic science. And that was on the cutting edge of medicine at that time, and I thought, this is great. My residency, and this is one of my mentors, who's still one of my mentors now, Dr. Bierman was the chair. He came from New York. He was the neonatologist. The Bierman pediatric textbook. He was my chair, and I had a wonderful experience of continuing to develop under his guidance and shepherd. I think that when I was finished my residency, I had my first son, and I wanted to stay in Cleveland for a year and do a fellowship. So I went to Dr. Bierman and shared my ambition of what I wanted to do. And he says, Ernestine, we'll keep you right here, and you can go down and do a fellowship in general pediatrics. So I stayed there, did a general pediatric fellowship, and then went back to him and said, you know, it's time for me to go up, grow up and get a job. And I think we want to move to the Midwest. We don't want to be too far away from home. I like the idea of being within 12 hours of driving home. And I said, but, you know, Chicago is a good place. I call it up south. So we went to Chicago, my family and I, my husband and my one son. And I got a faculty position at the University of Chicago.
And again, another outstanding institution.
Yeah, but Dr. Bierman didn't give me much choice. He says, you can either, if you're going to go to Chicago, you can be at the University of Chicago or Northwestern. He said, that's it. I go, okay. So I followed guidance and went to the University of Chicago and was able to, they gave me 3 choices of job. They said you can work at La Rabida, and you know University of Chicago. You could work at Weiler, or you could work over here in this children and youth program that we have. And I did my homework. I did the research on the children and youth program. It was one of the first 5 in the country that was from the Social Security Act of 1965. I'm dating myself, but Congress appropriated funds then for community health centers to be established. Health Hill at Yale, Martha Elliott in Boston, one with UCLA out in California. University of Chicago had theirs, and I'm trying to think of the 5th one. Oh, and Columbia in New York. So when I went there, I saw things that I had studied in the School of Public Health, the history of all of that, and Jack Geiger and all of that came back. And so this is history walking right in front of me. I should do this. But I also got the bug and the connection that the Woodlawn organization, and you're familiar with this, had this rich history of really neighborhood development and engaging with health. And I felt this is where my calling. So I went to this CNY project. Dr. Dorfman, he's deceased now, you know that
Yeah,
name?
I know Dr. Dorfman.
Dr. Dorfman, his history imprints me in the way that Dr. Dorfman was a nephrologist, as you know, did his research, but he would take his white coat and his stethoscope every week and walk over into Woodlawn and see patients in Woodlawn. And I go, this is like I'm walking in the footprints of giants. So I said, I want to do this children and youth program, but I want to develop as a maternal and child health program. And my vision was able to be realized. My boss then, Berkelheimer, said, let's go do it. So what I was able to do, and it wasn't done before I got there, we set up, the clinical program was there, but I wanted to bring the academic world into it and said we can do clinical research, we can do education of the next generation of students and doctors and residents. And he said, we can do this, Ernestine, you go ahead and do it. I went over there first saying, I'm going to be the director of education, and I'm going to have fun doing education because I'm still excited about education. And I did that for 2 years, and when I was drafted into being the leader, the medical director. And so I became the medical director after 2 years. And it was first a CNY project, and it moved to being a maternal and child health project, and then it moved to being a lookalike federal qualified health center. And so I was there 14 years, and the evolution of that. I took 1 year off and went to Washington. Well, before I did that, Hannah Gray, the president of the University of Chicago, heard about the things I was doing and said, Earnestine need to be further developed in leadership. And so the vice president of community affairs at the University of Chicago, Kleinbach, you know his
Sure,
name.
Jonathan Kleinbach.
Jonathan. Mm-hmm. Jonathan put his handprint, one of my great mentors, and said, I see things we can do together. And so I did Leadership Greater Chicago. And from there, I wanted to do some other things, and I went to the dean and asked him, that the dean then was a pathologist, Dr. King, that name's familiar. And I said, I would like to do Robert Wood Johnson Health Policy Fellowship, and he said, no, go back to work. And that was okay, I didn't have any problems. 2 years later, another dean came, so I started the process over, Dean Hellman. Dean Hellman, I didn't know then until I walked into his office, he was on the committee that accepted me into medical school. So I walked into his office and gave him my history, and he says, I was on your committee, I know you, I know all of your history. Now, he came from Sloan Kettering to University of Chicago, and he became a mentor at that time. He basically supported me in doing the Robert Wood Johnson Health Policy Fellowship. Came back from Washington after being there a year, helped him to develop a health studies department. And then most of the people start moving. Hannah decided to step down. I call her we know each other through a distance, but I consider her life story as one of mine. I just watch her career and see how she handled academics. And then Jonathan, he didn't leave. My boss left. Dr. Gardner left, and then Berkelheimer left. And then I said, okay, maybe this is the time I should think about moving. And I was also moving around on the national scene with the Lucia Packard Roundtable. And Dr. Kleitman was on that round table with me. Dr. Bierman led that round table. That shows you the connection, all the dots still connect. And he kept up with me. He said, Ernestine, you cannot say you can't do this, so you're going to have to do this. Some of my mentors don't give me a choice about what I do. So Dr. Bierman sent a call to me and said, you have to do this. So I did the Lucia Packard with him, and we would have experts around the country come together and talk about what do we need to do policy-wise to help children. Dr. Kleitman was on that committee, and he moved here, I think, in '92. And from '92 to '94, he was asking me to come and see what he was doing. And I go, this is great. This department had 65 faculty. I was in a larger department at the University of Chicago. But with all of the changes and transition, it was an opportunity. I go, well, I can't miss. And I came on up here in '94. I tell people I slowly make changes to my career, but I did. And he gave me the option of setting up the Center for the Advancement of Underserved Children and said, what would you want to do? And I said, well, what I'd like to do is bring the bridge between community, public health, and medicine. And so I consider that's been my career, is being the bridge across those three sectors. The center is set up in that way to develop partnerships that we really don't, and we bring that public health sector into the academic world and help to bridge there, as well as bringing the community in. So I'm up to coming here in '94, relocated my family here, and it's been very productive for me. I started out doing different projects. John Weiss was here. I would meet with him regularly and get challenged on what I could do, but also get support, because he was very much the school-based health. I started out with setting up a clinic at Clark Street School with a nurse with a Master Lock grant, and did that in partnership with Next Door and Clark Street School. And then moved from there to work with, I think somehow the governor, Tommy Thompson, found out I was here in this state and wanted me to help lead the Tobacco Control Prevention Initiative. So I did that for 3 years, in addition to continue to work in the center. And then I was looking for other things to do, like I don't have enough to do. And then I said, we have to do something about the next workforce. What happens to, what I was noticing in the department when I got here, most people train here, good training opportunity, but they move to the suburbs. And what I consider it means you're training in an inner city urban area for people who are low income or middle income, and then all of the benefits is paid back into the suburbs. So I was committed that we can change a little bit of that dynamic by exposing and training within the community and letting the residents understand what resources and opportunities exist for that population that they're seeing in the emergency room. And also knowing that I'm not going to get all of them, because, you know, I'm in my class, as I tell people, I want the best neurosurgeon, the best surgeon, the best specialty. But there are some people who have to do primary care and should do primary care and also have to serve the underserved. So I was able to start a program. It was Howard Fuller, June Perry, Pat McManus, the dean of the law school then, who's deceased now, the dean of the social welfare school at UWM. We all got together and sat down and said, what can we do to train our future workforce to see the opportunities of serving the underserved? And we came up with the the Community Pediatric Training Initiative, funded by Dyson, that we brought here. It was a 5-year grant, one of the first 6 in the country that we were able to develop a community pediatric training, and now that program sits at the Academy of Pediatrics. And so that was the beginning of doing what I'm continuously doing right now since 1997, is having parents come in with physicians, residents, and take them and let them understand what are the resources in the community and how can those resources, they need to understand those resources enough to know health is determined, at least 75% of health is determined by what you do outside of the clinical and genetic world. And understanding the quality of what they can contribute to improve the quality of those programs. So my parents will come in, and the parents help the residents in real time understand if I'm using a program, WIC, or some of the family resource centers, what are some of the benefits that my family gain or garner from those, and how the residents can tap into those as a resource to help their families to optimize their health and well-being. So I continue to do that. I've gotten grants over the years that help me to understand better the health disparities that exist and what can we do to address the health disparities. The program I had a program, Reach Out and Read, in Chicago, and I have a thirst for saying that literacy starts early. It doesn't have to wait until you in school. And so I brought that program here, even though it started in Boston in 1989. And so I opened it up in the Downtown Health Center, as well as all of the federal qualified health centers. By this time, I had a strong partnership relationship with all of them, and they were happy to change their waiting room areas such that physicians can encourage and diagnose literacy from 6 months from birth, really, and see that as a part of what becomes a developing organism for the future. So we now have 8 Reach Out and Read sites that we coordinate efforts and support literacy and promotion starting at birth. And the 5 rhymes, the 5 R's that we'd like to talk about is reading, routine, rhythm, reward, and relationships. And so we want physicians to use books as a way to help parents demonstrate the satisfaction that children get from reading, as well as we also want physicians to encourage parents, like we model reading aloud as something that children benefit from. And I'll be talking about some of the things that we've learned from some of the research this Thursday at the Women in Science talk. But it's been rewarding to see how now I don't have to sell the program. It's sellable by itself. And there's a lot of people throughout this community who really understand literacy is so essential. Now, what helps concomitantly is a lot of the brain research that's been done. And so when you look at synapses development and cognitive development that goes on with children, I think it was just all came together at the right time. So that's why one of the pet peeves I have is around literacy enhancement, as well as institutions becoming more health literate. So I'm on 2 committees. Well, I've been on 2 committees this year with the National Academy of Science, and we're looking at health literacy as it relates to health outcomes. And then we're also looking at science literacy. Does that require that foundation for health outcomes and the public support for science research? Stay tuned. There's a report coming out to tell that.
Now, let's go back. When you were at University of Chicago, is it fair to say, while there were some initiatives by the university to partner with the Woodlawn organization and others, in terms of the medical center, there really hadn't been a lot of engagement beyond Hyde Park into the surrounding community. And so your initiative was really one of the first, and it was
Right.
something that had been sought for a long time, if I remember
Yeah.
correctly.
It was, and we were one of the ones who did it where we wanted to not, in fact, I was fortunate to say some of the research we did, one of the first chlamydia community-based research was done in the center that I ran. And we had a fellow that we trained. But the truth of the matter, one of the barriers and the mistrust and the tensions between the community and the University of Chicago, and you're very much familiar with this, is that we are a community that's used as guinea pigs, and you benefit from doing research on us, but we don't get the benefit. I was determined that you don't have to have it that way, that we can turn this into a partnership. And the partnership must be mutually beneficial. And so I spent a lot of time with my board, which I reported to, convincing them the benefit of research. And one of the strategies I always say is that if I write you a prescription for amoxicillin for an ear infection, I'm probably doing research is whether or not I can make sure that you benefit from it. Am I accountable to share that with you? And I was able to get them to take that journey with me and trust us enough to be accountable, mutually accountable, because part of it is I need it for my research, I need it for advancements, but they also need to benefit from it as far as an action agenda. What do we do next to improve the health of our children and youth? So we were able to conduct research there at that center, and that was where Jonathan and I worked close together, and he supported my role of you have to navigate that terrain, and it wasn't always easy. There was some lessons learned for all of us in going through some of the things that I experienced at the University of Chicago. But I enjoyed the partnership, and it gave me the tools, as one of my colleagues say. There are lessons you learn in these experiences that you'll never get in the textbooks. And I think I've been through quite a few of those.
Now you mentioned that Dr. Kliegman was influential in bringing you to Milwaukee, but
Right.
the medical environment here was perhaps not as internationally renowned as what you'd experienced in Chicago and Cleveland and in Boston.
Right.
Who else did you talk with when you were considering
Talked
the
to Dr.
Milwaukee?
Bierman.
Okay.
I talked to Dr. Bierman, who helped me to, I looked at Cincinnati and I looked at other places, and I was, Ohio has always been a magnet for me. Someone said to me when I went to Harvard, why would you go to school in any other state other than Ohio? Look at all the medical schools we have here. So, and I said, but sir, this is Harvard. So the point is that it would have been easy for me to go back to Ohio, but there was Dr. Bierman and I, we were on a WIC review committee together. So I was on this national WIC review. And I pulled him to the side, and we had a sidebar counseling session. And he said to me, any place you go, if you go to Ohio, he knew the people there. He was giving me guidance on the people there. But he said, your passion is community. And I know that Cleveland has a similar passion. And so it was the opportunity to take my passion with his passion and enhance the exponential value that I would get out of it.
Now, when you came to Milwaukee, there really weren't initiatives that were in place in the community.
Oh, no.
And so how did you go about meeting people in the community, finding the willing partners?
Some of them, Dr. Kliegman directed me to, the Black Health Coalition, Howard Fuller. There were people, Dr. West, what's her name? She used to be here at one of Milwaukee Health Services. So Wesley, what was her name? But she's the internist. So I had an opportunity to meet a variety of different people. I think he put me on platform. It was Bishop Tutu was here, and I had to do my first talk with Bishop Tutu, which was impressive. And I think the idea of seeing what Milwaukee had to offer as potential, and also having the interface with the children. I've gone into the school system and seeing the potential that children had. I did some of this in Chicago. I went to Robert Taylor Home and did lead talks. But when I came here and did some of the interaction with some of the leaders and the institutions and saw the children, I saw there was really an opportunity to say, I can make a difference. He challenged me because I first told him, I said, well, Bob, it's great what you're doing up here. This is a smaller scale, but there's 1 million children who could use my skills in Chicago. But here's the difference for me, is that in Chicago, and I talked to one of the deans there, I said, we have 5, 6 medical schools in Chicago, in and around, including the northern Chicago area. and to get them to sit down together in a leadership role and agree upon what they can do. Boston did this. That was something that I thought I didn't see that materializing anytime soon. Whereas coming here, I met John Weiss, I met Bob Cleveland, I met Bozier. These were leaders who I consider, in fact, I can tell you a story. I went to Mr. Bozier with one of my questions about what I could do, and he said, Ernestine, why don't you do this? And I go, that's really brilliant, Mr. Bozier. How did you know that? He said, that's what they pay me the big bucks for. So I really had the benefit of all of their guidance. Even when I was in this Multicultural Student Affairs office, I remember talking to him more often about challenges I was having as I was navigating the terrain. But I was fortunate to be able to get and share into different people's wisdom and perspective that I know benefited me as I transcend and try to be effective in this arena. And you know, I can't say, you know, I've worked with so many different stakeholders here, you know, whether it's through the legal channel, the education channel, the corporate channel. I've been fortunate enough to sit down and talk to people on a level of individual to individual, but champion children at the same time and being passionate about where I stand when it comes to children. I wasn't shy about saying, if I'm going to influence the next generation or my colleagues around me, I got to share enough of myself. And sharing enough of myself, and someone said that to me when I took the state job. They said, you can't just stay in Milwaukee and do what you need to do across the state. I got to go to Eau Claire, and I got to go to Green Bay, and I got to go to the different parts of the state, Beloit and others. So I did that, and I did that with the idea that people like to touch you and talk to you and get to know you as a person. And so I continued some of that on a statewide basis, as I also did it on a local basis. And I'm not shy to, you know, request what I want on behalf of children, not so much for me personally, but on behalf of children, and what we can do collectively is much greater than what I could do on my own. One of the things I did notice when I got here that was different than Chicago was that it was easy for people to turf and say, this was mine. And let me give my concrete example. What I came here and I said to the administrator, who's no longer here, I said, I'd like for my center to have the medical college and this logo and children's logo side by side. And he said, you can't do that. I said, well, why can't I have that? I said, I'm supported by both. And he says, you just can't do that. We don't mix the logos. And I was appalled. I couldn't believe it. So I persist, and I don't know how to, if I told you some stories in Chicago about my persistence, that you would say, you can tell me no, but I'll come back and figure out, is there enough angle that we can do? So I kept going back and forth. This was Bill, and Bill finally said, let her have those logos and put it up on her center. So that was the beginning of saying, you can demonstrate that you can be a collective hybrid and work across sectors and not be caught in the silos that people sometimes find themselves in. And I think that has worked for me, to always be willing to sit down and have a compromise. Now, I've had partnerships that didn't work also. The terms got too formidable and I couldn't work out the relationships. But even I left those partnerships with the opportunity. If the opportunity presents themselves, I'll be back.
You come from a background in both medicine as well as public health. Mm-hmm. How has your public health background helped serve you as you've advanced these different initiatives?
You know what, it's broadened the perspective of health for me. And when I said broaden it, meaning that, you know, clean water, environmental toxins not being available. We didn't spend a lot of time getting into that in our formal medical training. But when I did my master's in public health, there's occupational health, and there were environmental health issues, and understanding systems became a part of that training. I took part of my time when I was doing my master's in public health. We went to the Appalachians, we went back to Mississippi, and I got to see environments of when you establish health system. And let me tell this story. Dr. Shirley is no longer around, but he's one of the people who I looked up to. Dr. Shirley created the Mississippi Mall down in Mississippi. I went to see what he has established after medical school. He went to NYU, but he went to Tougaloo too. So that's why I said that, the long history. But he came back home to Mississippi and he set up a state-of-the-art clinic in Hinds County. And it was all about catfish farms when I went back down there. So we were out one night eating dinner after we had taken some tours. And my instructor was with me, Dr. Valeria, who's no longer at Harvard, but she was with me, and we were talking about what he'd accomplished. And I was saying, Dr. Shirley, I'm very impressed with some of the things you've accomplished. And I said, you have state-of-the-art medical records, you have laboratories, you have x-ray, you got all these things, and you bring it to Jackson, Mississippi, in the urban area, Hinds County, where people really get the benefit of good health delivery. And he had a second site that he moved into the rural community. And in the rural community, he used a trailer. And he took the trailer, he bought a trailer, and he took the trailer out to this on a rural country road. And he had set up the rooms inside of that trailer was his office. He'd set it up like it was a practice. And he said, well, thank you, Earnestine, for the accommodations, but I really don't consider the efforts I did in setting up that clinic that heroic. He said, the best thing I did, he said, you know what I did that really improved the health of the citizens in Hinds County, rural Hinds County? I said, well, what was that? He said, just by me putting that trailer in the rural community, the municipality, I could petition the municipality to run water, municipal water out, such that all of the citizens in that immediate rural community could have water. And that was better than the well water that he was offering them. So is that that's the public health. So that's an example of where I got my public health imprint, was to go beyond my little office of my stethoscope and my otoscope, ophthalmoscope, and my computer or my medical records, and look at what's going on around. Like when I go to Washington Park and look at what's in the lagoon, or you look at what's going on in the neighborhoods, and I've done a community assessment in the Concordia area. So you go, is it safe? And this is health. You have to go beyond just me saying, come in, let me take your blood, let me diagnose it, let me look in your ear, look in your mouth, and make a diagnosis. And I got some of that at Chicago. When I was in Chicago, I had the opportunity to have some young people who was like 18 years of age. And she had 4 children at 18. And I was always baffled that I was going to be the best doctor for her that I could be, because it was like, my God, look at this situation. She's doomed to repeat this. I went to Robert Taylor Home really because of her. She lived up on the 16th floor in Robert Taylor Homes. Her child had asthma. She needed reproductive care herself. I did her gynae and family planning. And some of the things that I was due diligent about, going down my checklist, and do you have toothbrushes, do you have these things? And her life was so complicated. She could hardly make it upstairs with 4. The oldest was like 6 or 4. It was really 4 children, like stair-step. But it was saying, if I'm going to make a difference, I got to change her environment or try to change the circumstances. It's not going to happen with my prescription and a pen or the blood I draw. So that probably is what some of those exposures and experience have helped me to understand the need for the bridge and the partnership between the medical world that we live in and public health, as well as the community.
Now, who have been some of the people on the faculty, both in pediatrics as well as other departments, that have partnered with you in some of these initiatives?
Well, I've been fortunate to have, there are people, I guess I'm getting old enough, I trained Stu Berger. He was a resident with me down at the University of Chicago. He was one of my residents who I think I've had a chance to see some of the imprints, because when I got here and he was doing the fibrillators across the high school.
Project Adam.
Yes, Project Adam. So Stu is, you asked about, here's some people who I'm proud of as an offspring of my early imprinting and training. Some of the other people, named Bruce Committer was when I first got here, was very much a supporter and a champion, I think. And then Peter Haven. All of these are people who I can say have lent a real support and been partners with me. And since I've been here, Margolis, I remember him calling me about an adolescence that he had and wanted some pointers on what's going on. So I've been fortunate to have quite a few people that, even Colin Rudolph when he was here, these are people who helped to build the Department of Pediatrics to get it where it is now. I did look up before I got here to say, where's the Department of Pediatrics was? Out of 84 departments, we're number 25 when it comes to getting NIH grants. And we're over 300 faculty. So we went from 65, and I tell people that about Cleveland and give him credit for building a department from 65, which is small in the world of pediatric departments, to over 300. We look and compete with places like Cincinnati and others when it comes to our faculty size. And you bring in some of the most progressive specialties into this arena. So I've been fortunate to partner with quite a few people. When she's gone now, but she was here, and we did the environmental grant together with UW and Madison over in Milwaukee. It was, what's his name? Hines' wife, Gail McCarver.
Yes.
Gail McCarver. And I've, for some reason I've had a little bias to neonatologists. They've always been good partners to start out, because you start early and you can hopefully prevent some of the things that we see down the road.
Now, you mentioned Dr. Berger as one of the people that you mentored.
Yeah.
As you look at the many students that you've worked with over the years, I'm sure you're proud of them all, but who are some of the ones who you believe have really gone on to help make a difference?
I can go from, it's Isabel Knox at the University of UConn. She's doing medical education, and she was my intern when I was a resident, but she keeps in touch with me. Karen Goldstein's still at the University of Chicago. She does primary care there. But there are quite a few people, and their names are endless. I just was at a meeting at the PAS in Baltimore, and I walk down the hall and I see folks, and we just sort of have this reunion, like, what are you doing and where are you? So I feel that there's been an opportunity to reconnect with many people who stayed in academic medicine and have tried to make a difference since they've been in academic medicine. But Katie Plax down in St. Louis is one who she does advocacy. She was with me at the University of Chicago. Now you get my memory to say, okay, can I remember all these names? But I feel good about the people that I've been able to share, have common passion, I would say, and then see their career blossom into an arena that they understand that bridge I was talking about of public health, medicine itself, and community. And so I'm proud of the people who I've seen follow through and do that. And some of the people here who've gone on, one of my residents who now went to Africa, I'm trying to remember his name, but he did some missionary work in Africa. But he talked about, he did a fellowship in Heme Onc, and he said, Dr. Willis, after doing this pediatric training initiative, I won't go and do a fellowship in any place that don't have a community component to it. That by itself gives me a reward, or feels that my time is well spent. Now, I don't take all the credit, because they may have had that passion before they met me. But, and I just met with a young lady who's working on a PhD, and she said, I came here to the medical college because of you, and what I've been able to garner from just being in your presence, because I wanted to collaborate with you. So I look at that as, she says, I don't want to do mixed methods research, and mixed methods research meaning you want to do qualitative as well as quantitative analysis. But it's sort of like she understands that she needs to not only master the methodology of research, but also don't forget to go back and touch base with real life events and make it real to the people who benefits the most. And I've tried to keep that perspective in my career, is that it's okay for me to understand the protein mechanism and whatever pathology that we may manifest. But it's also important for me to understand what it means to the human being that I got to relate to. And so I don't want to lose that perspective, is keep that broad lens.
Now, in addition to your appointment in pediatrics, you also have an appointment in public health in the Institute for Health and Society.
Right.
And you've been involved in numerous committees throughout the institution over the years, and you've helped with our diversity programs, as well as helping to recruit some students from the underserved populations as well.
Yeah.
How do you've been stretched thin,
Yeah. I've been stretched thin, but I think that I see some of the fruits of my labor. So that is a reward. And let me use an example. When we first got here, remember we had, and you know this, it was the 333. It was research, education, and service. And so, and I made the list, and I went down this list, and I was like, all the programs I have, let me just see which one is service, which one is research service, which one is education, and then which one is administrative strategic planning. And yes, the Institute for Health and Society, I was a part of that in getting that off the ground. I was a part of looking at the diversity and trying to assure that we do something about diversity. And a lot of that is benefiting from what Harvard shared with me. I don't take lightly. You pass, as my son says, Mama, you must pass it forward. So, and both of my sons have that mentality, is that you've been fortunate to get things and to accomplish things, but pass it forward is to help the next generation that comes after you. So I feel that's an obligation. And did my grandmother tell me that? No. My mother tell me that? Not really. I just think it's something that I've seen that I feel fulfilled and rewarded by over the years, to say, if I can help the next generation understand. And I was at the meeting in California, and this was young ladies who were grabbing me and said, I want to talk to you and say, how did you transcend the academic track? And I said, well, I didn't do it the usual way. I mean, I'm not the typical who go into a laboratory and get 25 papers out a year. And, I had a different track. But I've also been able to call it a trailblazer. I've been able to be as a trailblazer with the understanding that there is something to be shared with others, and you don't want to lose sight of that. I think if you're in academics, you absolutely have an obligation to do it.
It's been 21 years since you came to MCW.
You counted it right.
And
Yeah.
as you noted, it was a department of 65 in pediatrics when you came. Now it's over 300.
Mm-hmm.
As you've seen MCW change and evolve over the years, what do you see as the most significant changes that have occurred here?
I'm going to give that fourth mission of the leg, that's critical, and I feel that was wonderful. I didn't tell you about meeting Tom Hefty, and I met him in Madison. Well, I really met him here downtown. I went into an office he was in. I thought I had a meeting. I didn't know he was going to be there. But then him and Tim Collins, there are people who I can...
From Blue Cross.
Yes, from Blue Cross, who have been really good, supportive people in my career, in my development. So that fourth mission, I think I see that as a big positive. I do see that there has been an enhancement in diversity. If I walk around this campus where I was when I first got here, I see more diverse people. And that means not just patients, meaning at the desk, being a receptionist, I can go through Freighter and you can appreciate the diversity. So I can say diversity is one of the things that I do take a lot of pride in. And not because it's something I need to see, because I can always, trust me, I get in my car and drive to places I want to go to. And I tell people the stories like Mr. Bolger brought up what was going on with Miss Taylor out in the community. He said, Ernestine, there's an oasis out there. And I go, okay, I'll go out and see it. So I didn't get an appointment. I just got in my car on my way home, and I said, oh.
This is Cordelia Taylor with
Yes,
Family House.
Yes. I said, just drop by and knock on the door and let's see where they will let you in. So I did that. And this impromptu visitor, myself, I introduced myself and I said, Mr. Bolger, the president, said that there was something I just needed to see out here. So I go knock on the door, and I was absolutely just appalled and amazed how well she was taking care of the senior citizens there. And they had tablecloth, not paper, cloth tablecloth. They was having china, they was having a nice meal, and it wasn't like they did it for me. This was my surprise visit, and I walked in about 6 o'clock at dinner time. So I tend to have this tendency to say, I want to see, is it authentic? Is it real? And I go and do my own little investigator. Next life, I'm going to be an investigator reporter. But I tend to do that with the idea of understanding where, and do my own assessment of what's going on that's positive in the community and what's going on that needs further investment of human capital. So I do that with the idea that I think that people are definitely more than just what I see in the exam room. And so I want to see what's going on in the lives of people, and especially children. So there are things that I just show up at because it's a good thing and I feel like doing it.
Now, the flip side, 21 years ago when you came here, there were values, there was a culture that existed at MCW. Does any of that still exist today?
I think high quality of education still exists. Pride in teaching exists, and I do appreciate that. And that's some things that keep me here. There's always been a strong pride in education. Mark Dante and Deb set some of that standards that's high, and it's been maintained. I give credit. I think the progressiveness and quality care is still here. I benefited from it, so I speak as one who say it was the best care that I could have imagined over at Freighted. So I don't have, and I think that same story can be told for children who come to Children's Hospital. I get those stories anecdotally all the time. I went to children. I do get some stories that's not commendable, but I try to say, well, we got to fix it. And I try to be a part of that, trying to fix it if I get some that's not as commendable. But I think quality in education has been a strength. We have grown in diversity. We still have some more to grow. I think what I'd like to see is more diversity across every level. I think that if I look in that hallway and look at the chairs and others, we got board members, and I give credit that the board has been more diverse. But I think you have to do that at every level. And so, it shouldn't stop. When I first got to children, our youth children, it's because I know that hospital better. I mean, you couldn't see anything but blonde, blue eyes if at the nursing station, and even only time you saw people of color was down in the basement cleaning. That is not diversity the way I interpret and define diversity. Diversity must be across every sector, middle management, upper management, and I think that's where we still have some room to grow and develop. But I'm proud of what we've accomplished. I'm not taken away from that at all. And I think that's a part of life, you continuously improving and growing.
Now, in the last few years, under the leadership of Dr. Raymond and Dr. Kirshner, we've seen MCW grow. We've started new campuses. There have been new initiatives with pharmacy. And what do you see as the future for MCW?
I think I like that. I think what you do have to do is manage the growth and manage the collaborativeness across them. And when I say that, it's important that we don't sit in isolation. I don't know as much about the Green Bay campuses and the middle of the state. I think it's Stevens Point campus. And so to know those faculty members, that means someone has to work at that. It's not going to just happen. But it's to know the parts, and you're greater. The whole is greater than the sum of its parts, but you have to manage those sums to be effective. And I know the pharmacy school here. So for me, I think that's all good, and that's really things that we should be doing. I think that, and here's one of my concerns, that we have a school that is it's growing by leaps and bounds, and that's a good thing. But we also have to remind ourselves that we have an obligation for everyone to somewhat know. And I'll use who was here? The guy who was head of AAMC. He did a great talk. I thought he did.
Jordan Cohen?
No, not Jordy. The one after Jordy.
Daryl Kirch?
Daryl Kirch. Daryl Kirch did a good talk when he talked about what's going on at Johns Hopkins and the growth that they have. But every citizen need to be engaged enough to understand why you're contributing to the whole, and how that whole is the important that we support, not just pieces. So I think that's the work we still have to do, is making sure that everybody feel as vested in in fact, knowing I should know more about Green Bay. I should know more about the pharmacy school and where diversity will fall within that rubric. So we have some work to do, but I think that's important. I don't ever think you're supposed to stop growing. So I think that's a plus, that we continue to grow.
What do you want your legacy to be at MCW?
Oh, I haven't thought about that. Okay, Dick. I think I got so much work to do.
I put you on the spot. I'm sorry.
You did. I think all I want to be able to do is say that she passed it forward. Whatever she benefited from, that she left the next trajectory for the next generation. I don't necessarily think it's about me as much as it's about what you can accomplish in your season. I call it my season. What you can accomplish in your season, but that you know that the future, there's another season that's brighter. And I think that's what I'm supposed to be a part of, is whether I'm here or in some other land, I know I supported that season. I look at programs that I've been on boards and tried to help see them progress. And, I look at Next Door. Someone said to me, you know, this is your home. You helped build this. And I go, I know, but, Educare was a part of my legacy to see, and with Mary Kellner and others. And she reminds me of that when I'm with her, that I was in some of the first meetings where the brainchild of Educare was being developed. And then the clinic, I was there for the brainchild of the clinic. And I don't have to operate the clinic. I just have to say, help to make it possible, and have to make sure it stays there with quality. It's not about just something, a building for me. It's about quality of service.
You mentioned Mary Kellner before. What does it mean to you to hold the Kellner chair?
I'm really, sometimes I even get kind of emotional because I really feel proud that she and her husband, her family, would think enough of me to give me that level of security in my academic career. I have nothing but admiration for the family. I feel like I'm a part of the family, but I'm the ebony side of the family. But I have nothing but admiration. I think Mary is one person who I have seen Junior League, Next Door. I've seen her on many committees, and she and I have been on committees together. In fact, I'm going to be joining her on another committee because she just asked me to join the board of Cardinal Stretch, and I can't say no to Mary. But I think there is her drive to be caring and compassionate about what's going on in the community. And I say that with a lot of respect. I've seen her truly, she don't have to come to this neighborhood that she comes into and, do work. I mean, she doesn't get paid. She just volunteer her time. And she does it unconditionally. And I say unconditional in the sense that she can objectively understand and see the need of other people, but at the same time recognize that her abilities to affect change, and she want to do it in a quality way. And she wouldn't know that I'm observing this, but I do value I'm proud, in fact, to have that type of person as my affiliated endowed chair. I think that, there are people who give you their name and they give you their money. And I'm not knocking the money because we need it. It's a margin and mission. But it's the respect for the person that gives me the real pride for me to say that I'm a Kellner professor.
Thank you for everything that you've done for MCW.
Thank you. I've enjoyed it, and I'm going to continue. Work is not done yet.